Hi everyone, my name is Sean Howard. I'm just taking a few minutes to share my backup strategy. I'm a professional photographer and I've been in a situation in the past where I have lost client files and there is nothing worse. Well, maybe there is something worse. One of my dear friends just lost potentially years of her work. I've seen a lot of people talking online about backup and there's a lot of misinformation. So I want to share with you now how I protect myself to make sure it's really unlikely I ever lose files again, because I never want that to happen again. I can't tell you the number of times I cringe when I read forums with people saying very ridiculous things about backup, like you don't need to worry about it, just buy a RAID. It's all BS. You have to be extra careful, but the problem is you don't learn that till you've been burned. It only takes one major loss for you to realize that all digital information is at risk, extreme risk. Hardware fails all the time. So you want to make sure that you have multiple redundancies in place on site and off site. So on site means you've got it being backed up in a few different ways in your studio or your house or your home or your office. And offsite means in the cloud with a reputable provider and even on a drive that you store at a friend's house or your parents or wherever. And it has to be easy. Some of what I'm going to go through today may look a little complex, but I've gone out of my way to create a backup system that is day in, day out, hour by hour, being done automatically in the background. Because if it's not, I won't do it. This is my full backup plan in a nutshell. It's easier than it looks. And I also need to point out that this right now is a Mac, right? I'm a Mac user as a photographer, but I'm also going to address PCs. Now, I'm a photographer, but this will apply to just about anyone. And as I said, I'm going to start with Mac, and then we're going to go into how this works for PC Windows users, and it's pretty much the same. That's the cool part. There's one or two pieces of software that have to change. I have over 100,000 photos to protect, about 4 terabytes of data that I'm trying to protect and back up. And I'm storing all those photos on a Drobo RAID, the 5D. It's attached via, I think, USB 3 to my computer, or it's attached somehow to my computer. And that's basically my drive that I'm storing all the photos to. And it's a multi-array RAID, meaning it's got multiple disks. And there's a lot of talk out there about RAID 1, RAID 2, RAID 5. Drobo uses their own proprietary, but it's basically mixing the files between those drives so they're redundant. So if any one drive fails, I can just pull it out, put a new one in, and I'm back up and running. That's critical. That's called hot swappable. If you buy one of these little lacy RAID drives, it's all in one, 2 drives, I use those, but I can't hot swap it. If one of those drives goes down, the whole device is dead. Okay? It's really important that you be able to keep your drive running when you have a drive failure. So that's where the photos are going, onto that Drobo. But I also want to make sure I'm protecting, all my email, all my, Lightroom catalog file, all my other things on my computer, my software. Because if I have a major disaster, I want to be able to be back up and running with also everything else on my computer. I can't work if I only have my photos. There's a lot of other things we need in our business. We want to make sure we have backed up. So I'm using on the Mac something called Time Machine. Every hour, it backs up any change files on my computer to one of those lacy drives. Okay, and it's every hour just putting whatever's changed, and I can roll back very easily to an earlier version of a file. I've used this when I've deleted a client file by mistake. I realize a few hours later, and then I can go back to an older version of that file, from a few hours ago. Okay, and I'm going to talk about how you can do that with a PC as well. It's actually very similar now with the latest Windows. Lightroom saves a backup of my catalog. So the catalog is the database file that it doesn't store my photos in there. That's the nice thing about Lightroom. It creates a catalog file with all my stars and settings for every raw file, and that gets saved every once in a while. Lightroom every week will back up the catalog automatically. You can set that in Lightroom, and I put that to another drive just so I make sure I have a series of backups on backups. But again, the photos are stored on that RAID drive. Every evening, and this is, by the way, my favorite part of my backup plan. Every evening at 2 a.m., I have Backblaze set to copy any new files to the cloud. I think I pay about $100 a year for a lot of peace of mind. I've set up Backblaze. It's a piece of software, runs on my Mac, and it also works for PC. Here you can see how I've configured it roughly. I basically checked two boxes, the Macintosh hard drive and the Drobo. So this is my computer and my Drobo are both backing up to Backblaze in the cloud. My ISP doesn't charge me for bandwidth that I use after 2 a.m. and up to 8 a.m. So between 2 and 8 a.m. I get free bandwidth. So I've set my Backblaze to run every night at 2 a.m. and work through any new files and move them up to the cloud in Backblaze. And Backblaze just does that automatically every evening. The idea being I now have a copy of all my raw files sitting on the Backblaze servers, which they are also backing up. So those are not here. They're off-site in the cloud. Before I go on, I should point out there's a delay often to get all those files up to the cloud. Okay? They're big. I got a lot of raw files, so it can take a long time to, if I do a major event and I have 1,000 new images, it's going to take a week or two for all of those new images to work their way up. So it's not foolproof for yesterday or last week. Like if I just do an event, load everything in, and then everything dies, Backblaze probably isn't going to save me. But any event that's a few weeks old, I've got it redundantly up on the cloud. To that end, I also often, if I complete a major piece of work, I'll output JPEGs, and Lightroom can automate that for you on import. I create a JPEG version of all of my raw files, and I put those on Dropbox and Google Drive. So I pay for a Google Drive account called Google Apps, but I also have a Dropbox account, so I'm creating a JPEG version. Those upload pretty quickly, and so I also have JPEGs. I don't want to work from a JPEG, but I'd rather have it than not have it. So this way, at least I have the file, should I have a major catastrophe and Backblaze not have uploaded the raw files yet. Every few weeks, I clone my RAID drive. Now remember, my RAID has all my raw files on it, and I'll clone that drive. Cloning is where you basically make an exact copy of a drive. And I then take that drive and I have that at a friend's house. So every once in a while, and I'm bad at this, sometimes it can be a month, but the idea is every few weeks I'll have my friend bring that drive over, we'll have some, we'll chat, we'll have a good time, I'll set up a clone going, and then I'll bring that drive back to him and just keep it there. So if I have a major failure and my offsite is relatively recent, it's a lot faster to just go get that drive and plug it in than to wait to download or get a drive shipped to me from Backblaze in a worst case scenario. I'll talk more about that. So a clone is an exact copy of a drive. So I just need a drive that's big enough to hold how much data is on my RAID. And I love, if you're on a Mac, you will love SuperDuper. It's not that expensive. It is so easy to use. This is the whole screen for SuperDuper. There's not all this crazy configs and drop downs. I basically just say I want to back up all files, or I want to clone all files, or whatever. And I can basically make a copy of a drive. Here it shows a copy of the hard drive to backup. I would be doing a copy. I'll show you. So I'm looking at this. I'd be choosing here my Drobo, and I'd be choosing here my offsite drive, and then I'm going to back up all files. There's also a neat thing where it will just update the change files. It's so awesome. It saves so much time it will literally compare the two drives and just move anything new from the RAID over to my offsite drive. It's a great feature. Love SuperDuper. Let's walk through some scenarios. Disaster strikes all the time. Literally 3 weeks ago, before I went to France, my internal SSD drive, like my boot drive on my Mac, my main computer, basically would not boot. My computer froze, would not boot. Turns out the partition was corrupted. So I actually had to take my computer to get it repaired. It was something I was having trouble repairing, even with all the tools I have. So I had an emergency deadline. My computer is literally toast. It will not boot. But I believe everything else is okay. I don't know, but it looks like, nothing's on fire. I still have my RAID and my Time Machine and my offsite and all my stuff in the cloud. But my computer is toast. What do I do? In my case, I plug my laptop in. I've got some of my software on there, like Lightroom and whatever. I was able to pull my Lightroom catalog. Remember the backup I have? So it's a little out of date. It was basically a week out of 3 or 4 days out of date, but it was good enough. I was able to pull my catalog over to my laptop, and the catalog knows that all my files are on the Drobo. Plugged my laptop in, and boom, I was up and running. I had access to all my photos. It was a lot slower to work off the laptop, but I could get my work done before I went to Europe. That saved me while I was waiting for my computer to be repaired. This is an example of a single point of failure. You'll often experience a single point of failure. You're going to lose the computer, you swap something else in. You lose your offsite, well, you just replace it because you're up and running, you don't worry. You're often going to have a single point of failure. Now, you can also have an experience where you have multiple points of failure, and I'll talk about that. Computers are swappable, right? So no big deal. But what if I were to have a single point of failure on my RAID? But not a drive going bad. Okay, that happens all the time. As you see here, the Drobo will start flashing. Everybody see that? I'll do that again right here. Let's bring that back in. So my Drobo will just start flashing, and it'll be saying, hello, hello, and I will not be able to write to my Drobo. My Drobo will basically be there. I can access all my files. Like, I can read the thing, but basically it's lost one of the drives. One of the drives is completely dead. I'm basically at risk, if I lose another drive, of losing some data. So at this point, I basically just replace that drive. Okay? As I was saying, be careful with these RAID 1 mirror drives because all drives fail, and I want to be able to do hot swapping. Let me explain what that is. For my photos, an example, I lost that one drive at the bottom, so I literally just take the cover off my Drobo, pop out one of the drives, go down to Chinatown or wherever, get a new drive, literally plug it in. And it will literally start to rebuild that drive. The drive is going to be slow, but now I can continue to read stuff off that drive. I can't write to it still. But once the rebuilding is done, I'm back up and running. All my files are there, and I have tons of space again to start writing to that drive. That's hot swappable. That's what you want for your photos, because I'll tell you right now, I lose drives all the time. Like every few months, one of my drives will fail. Because I work a lot. I go through a lot of photos. I'm pounding these drives all the time. Okay? So you want to be ready for that with a hot swappable RAID. Pop a drive out, put a new drive in. Within an hour or two, you're back up and running. And then you're just ready to go, and you're set to go on with your day. No big deal. Okay, but what I want to talk about is when I lost my entire RAID. The actual enclosure failed. Like, my drives, I think, were probably still okay in there, but the entire enclosure just went down. Drobo was willing to ship me a new one. I had to pay for it. I had to buy a new one. But I couldn't find one locally, so I had to get a new one shipped to me. But that means I cannot access my RAID. All my photos are basically offline. I cannot access them, cannot work. And I'm waiting, as I just said, 2 days for a new one to arrive. So I had two choices available to me, right? And this is where we get into the offsite stuff, okay? I could basically go for my offsite copy of my clone of my RAID, right, which I have at my friend's house, or I can basically download the files that I need to work from Backblaze. Backblaze will let me download files up to a certain size, and then after that, they'll basically ship me overnight a drive with all my files that I need. I didn't want to wait even overnight, so I was able to call my friend, drive down, grab my offsite, which is basically a copy of my Drobo, and plug it in place. Now, I was missing a week or so of files, but luckily I had most of the files that I needed. So I could go back to working that day, wait for the Drobo to arrive, and then plug the new enclosure in, put the old drives in the new enclosure, and amazingly, it worked. It was awesome. I was very impressed by Drobo at that moment. Okay. What if my apartment were to burn down? This is multiple points of failure. This can happen. Now what I've just shown you is single points of failure of different varying degrees that you need to be ready for, because they will happen. Hopefully this will never happen to you. This is much rarer, but it can happen. Someone breaks in and steals everything. Your house catches on fire. Hopefully nobody's hurt, but all your equipment is ruined. In this situation, you want to make sure you're still protected so you can get back up and running. In my case, I'm back into the same two choices. I have my offsite copy that's a little bit old, or I have my Backblaze, which again might be a week or so out, but at least I have most of everything. And I probably have JPEGs of things up in my Dropbox and my Google Drive. So I would plug my laptop in and then decide whether I'm going to work off my offsite or get Backblaze to ship me a drive of all my files. And again, as I said, I'd probably lose a few days, but at least I could be working. Okay. Few PC users who are coming along going, oh, this is great for you Mac people. Okay. It's pretty much the same thing. That's what's really cool here, okay? You have your PC, your Drobo works with your PC, you can get these cool drives that'll work with your PC. Apple's Time Machine does not exist for you, of course, but I got some cool news for you if you got Windows 8. Now, I got bad news for you if you got Windows 8, you have Windows 8. The good news is you might have a really cool, easy solution here. You can also have an offsite drive at a friend's house, and you can also run Backblaze, Dropbox, and Google Drive. All the same. And remember, the cool thing about this system is this is all automated, right? I'm saving to my Drobo, right? Time Machine is backing up my computer. My Drobo, once every few weeks, I have to do this part. I have to, clone it. But Backblaze is automatic, and Dropbox and Google Drive are always synced, always uploading photos. Day in, day out, you really don't have to do much. Okay, so let's talk about the Time Machine problem. You may need a different piece of software to back up changing PC files on your PC to your Time Machine disk. But if you have Windows 8, Windows basically came out with a piece of software finally, and with a lot of innovation in the naming, they called it Time Machine Backup. So it's basically the same thing as Apple's Time Machine. You can set up so every hour it backs up any changed files to that drive, and then you've got a backup of your PC. Now remember, that's not your RAID. Okay, but remember also that your RAID you can set to be backed up to Backblaze in the cloud, $100 a year or whatever, really easy. Okay. For those of you who don't have Windows 8 but want to create that backup of your PC, you can try a piece of software called Oops Backup. Now, I have not used this software, but I was just looking online. A bunch of people seem to like it. I don't know. You can check it out. There's a few different softwares out there, that you can look at that will, if you're Windows 7 or earlier, will back up your computer every hour or so to a drive, whatever's changed. Right? The idea is it's not every hour copying everything from your computer over. That would take forever. It's just looking for what new files have changed, what new documents have you created, what new photos, and then it just copies those over if they're on your computer, not your Drobo. Okay. The only other real change is how you create the offsite copy. Right? I talked about every few weeks I basically clone this RAID drive to this offsite drive, and then I give it back to my friend. I have not used Aomi Backupper, but again, online, a bunch of people talking about it. It will basically clone a disk. Okay, it doesn't seem to be as nice as SuperDuper. It won't just copy the changed files and stuff, but at least it's there. So you can basically clone your main RAID over to an offsite copy. But again, remember, for the most part, you also can have Backblaze running Dropbox and Google Drive on your PC, and you don't have to think about it. They run automatically. So that's it. I hope this has been helpful. Please protect yourself. Don't learn this lesson the hard way. And don't listen to anyone who tells you a single RAID will save you. It will not. I've been there. I've done that. It's not fun when disaster strikes. Thank you all for your time. I hope this was helpful. You can see more of my work at my website or get a copy of my book. I'll talk to you all soon.